Tio Artiga was in big trouble. The patrolling bandit walking the perimeter of the hideout was an easy target, but Tio had missed his moment, and now he could feel the blood seeping out of a gash in his side that the bandit had just streaked across him with a furious flash of steel. Tio was backpedaling. He could feel the cliff's edge and a sheer drop not far away. But the bandit comes in again, hacking away with his crude blade. No finesse, no precision, just fury. Tio ducks and dives, each sudden movement sending jolts of pain through his body. He has to get out of here. He can't fight this brute. The best shot he has of staying alive is getting back to the boat. He has no time to climb down, but the water was pretty clear. If he could just get past this bandit, it was a 30-meter drop into the water and he had a fair chance of surviving the fall. It wasn't much, but it was all he had. The bandit swings again. Once, twice, 3 times Tio was nearly cleaved in two by the bandit's blade. But he narrowly manages to avoid the blows and spin out of the way, throwing his attacker off balance, slipping past them. He runs towards where he climbed up. Just a few more steps and he can throw himself off. But out of the mist, rounding the corner of the crumbling outpost wall, come 2 more guards, cutting Tio off. One of them pushes Tio to the ground, and the other brings his mace crashing down. Tio puts his hands up to defend himself, and feels the sickening crunch of his wrist breaking on impact. He rolls over to narrowly avoid the next blow and starts to crawl towards the drop. It's so close. He's nearly there, just a little closer. And that's when he feels himself being hauled to his feet. From behind him, he hears a voice. "Back off. This one's mine." And then Tio feels the breath leave his body as the sharp point of a blade presses into his back. Tio awakes, sweating, gasping for breath. He's in Mournstone, in the bunkhouse. He checks his back, then his side, then his wrist. He's in one piece. His heart is racing. Out of the corner of his eye, he can sense her, the presence. It never stopped being frightening. She never ever showed herself. But he always knew when she was there, and he always could hear her. Mila's spirit says, "Bad dream." And Tio says, "They always are." Hello, and welcome to the Bad Spot, where I, Matt Risby, and I alone am playing through Ironsworn. Yes, you heard that correctly, not Ironsworn Starforged, Ironsworn. And I'll be running that for the duration of this mini-campaign, where I revisit the very first game I ever played nearly 4 years ago, to see if a bit of experience might see it shake out differently. If you want to know what the campaign setup for this is, then you can watch the short intro video first, and if you want to know what that cold open was all about, then maybe check out my video on Failure, where I talked about Tio's fate in that original game. If you've already seen those and are up to speed, then welcome to this little experiment. I hope it'll be a lot of fun, while it lasts, obviously, and I'm really looking forward to revisiting the original Ironsworn, which I've not played since the very first lockdown back in 2020. We're going to crack on with that in a moment, but before we do, please like this video, subscribe if you've not done so already, and click the little bell icon to be notified of when the next video drops. These things are really important for supporting the channel and supporting what I do, and if you really want to support the channel, then why not check out the Bad Spot Patreon. There you'll get early access to all episodes, exclusive behind-the-scenes videos, and your name on screen, like these lovely people. So, we're here. We are in the Ironlands, and this adventure starts down on the ragged coast and in the fishing village of Mournstone. Now, up to this point, as detailed in that intro video, we have kept the campaign set up identical to the first go around, but now, as we come to the inciting incident, I think we're going to diverge from what we had before, because the first time it just wasn't particularly interesting. The vow we swore and the quests that we went on were pretty straightforward. It was kind of like a go here, meet this person, do the thing for the person. And whilst there is actually nothing wrong with that, I am playing this for your enjoyment as well as my own, and I think that we can try and do better, and we can try and give it a bit more depth. We can try and give it a bit more meaning. So Tio has been asked, or summoned is more likely, to Mournstone to see the warden, who wants us to do something. But I think I'm going to add a layer to that kind of relationship and say that the warden is actually a former mercenary who has worked with Tio before, and importantly kind of worked with Tio and Mila before. And the warden put the word out for help, and Tio answered. And the warden does not know that Mila is dead, and they will be expecting them both to arrive. And as Mila was the muscle, and this town of Mournstone has somewhat of a problem, I think that the warden could be underwhelmed by having just Tio arrive. And what we're here to do will definitely involve some bandits. I'm not going to change that. But who they are and what they're up to, we'll figure out as we go. But for now, let's envision Mournstone and our important meeting with the warden. So, having awoken from his nightmare, Tio emerges from the bunkhouse, and even though it can't be much past midday, there's a real kind of dusky feel to this place. It's gloomy, and the sea mist has rolled in to give this place like a thoroughly oppressive atmosphere. It's a fishing village, or is it actually? Because I was thinking, I had an idea that I might make this instead a whaling village, and I have no idea why, but I think that feels more evocative somehow. And whilst I said I don't know why, I'm pretty sure I came to this conclusion because I still have PTSD from the mission in the XCOM video game where you have to play through a kind of a terrifying extraction mission in a whaling village. And to be honest, I don't think I'll ever really be over that and what happened on that mission. Yeah, I think a whaling village is just more atmospheric for that reason. Anyway, the weather is not the only thing that lends this place a rundown feel, because it has seen better days. There's a few dozen stone buildings that make up, like, I don't know, the central hub of Mournstone, and they're all kind of like built slapdash, kind of haphazardly around a small dock or harbour or quayside. I'm never sure which one of those is correct, but I'm going to refer to it as a dock. And there's like zero uniformity to these buildings, by the way. Like, there's just different styles, different materials. It's all just kind of like a thing, right? But at the centre of these buildings, there is a tall stone tower, a watchtower, if you will. And it's kind of set back from the dock. And it also acts as a lighthouse. And if I think you were to hazard a guess, you'd probably say that the tower was probably built first, and the rest of the town, village, settlement, or whatever has just kind of sprung up around it over the years. There are streets, and some of them are cobbled and some of them are partly cobbled, but they are mostly dirt track. And there are many other wooden buildings that have been thrown up between the stone ones, and also other wooden buildings that kind of spread out further into the hills, little shacks and kind of makeshift sheds, giving this whole place a bit of a mismatched kind of patchwork vibe. And as Tio walks these streets, he notices that there really aren't that many people around, and those that are around tend to give Tio either the cold shoulder or a hard stare. Many of them appear to be injured, and a lot of the buildings have been damaged, either burned or kind of smashed up, and have boarded up windows and doors. And for a whaling village, there doesn't seem to be a great deal of whaling going on. As Tio walks the small dock, the smell of stale blood and blubber are the only things that give this place away as actually being a whaling village. There are a couple of ships, a couple of vessels kind of moored there, but there's no crews working them. And there's just very little by way of activity. There's maybe a few kind of fishermen kind of looking dejectedly at their empty, like kind of crab and lobster traps. There's just very much a downbeat vibe. And Tio can't be sure if it's just today or whether, this place is just a bit kind of off, And Tio's just kind of quietly observing all this and trying to kind of fill in the blanks and kind of find out what story these streets and buildings tell. The message he got was for him to make to Mournstone with great haste, with the promise of a great reward. But not why. And in his line of work, it's sometimes best not to ask, but a guy's going to wonder. And then he hears a voice calling from above. So, let's meet the warden, shall we? First of all, let's roll some pronouns. 54 is she, her. It's a woman's voice calling down. Tio Artiga! And Tio looks up. Now, he spent his whole life trying to remain hidden and circumspect, so having someone screaming his name from the top of a tower makes him feel, I don't know, like a little seen, and a little anxious about what's going on. And he kind of strains his eyes to see through the mist, and he can pick out the warden at the top of the tower. And she waves him up. He makes the short walk from the dock, and a door opens at the bottom of the tower as he nears. And an armed guard steps out. And this armed guard is not a mercenary, it's clear to say. At best, local militia, or maybe one of the warden's deputies. They're unarmoured, which is never a good sign. They're poorly equipped. And that's, to Tio, that's the giveaway, that this isn't a professional soldier. Their sword looks like it would maybe give you a nasty bruise, but that's probably about the extent of it. And this guard kind of motions for Tio to enter, and he does. And he follows the narrow, cramped stone spiral steps until he reaches another door, which is opened by another guard, through which he emerges out into the top of the tower. And up here, the first thing that hits him is the cold, which is biting, and he immediately kind of pulls his cloak up to shield against the wind. And it's not strong, the wind, but it chills him to the bone. The top of the tower opens into kind of like an observation deck type thing. I'd say not much larger than kind of like a larger room, kind of 4 or 5 meter square. And at the center of this deck is a stone stack. And on top of that, there is a pile of oil-soaked wood and kindling, which is sheltered by the roof, which kind of makes it like a cupola. Is that right? A cupola, it's kind of open. And this is kind of how the lighthouse operates. They just kind of like light the wood up, and that's how they guide the ships in. But there's no protection from the elements. It's all open. But the view from up here is pretty good, actually. You can see above the sea mist, which is important, this kind of low-lying sea mist. And you can even just about make out the very first of the barrier islands on the horizon. And leaning against the railings, the warden turns to greet Tio. So let's envision her. First, let's give her a name. 51 is Lestara. And 19 is Asher. Asher Lestara. I think that sounds better that way around. Asher Lestara, the warden of Mournstone. Okay, so what's a quick descriptor for her? I'm going to roll twice on this. 94 is stubborn. Okay. And 15 is bold. Bold and stubborn. Okay. So in the original Ironsworn, there actually isn't too much in by way of kind of character oracles and kind of like building a description from this and like first look or anything like that. But there is a character goal oracle which might help us kind of like establish a motivation with those kind of descriptors that we've already got. So, okay, 70 is defend a place. Okay, so those tie quite nicely together. She is stubbornly defending this place. Mournstone, that's the place she's defending stubbornly. But why? I think if we perhaps roll on the Settlement Trouble Oracle, it might give us a little something. 24 is Nature Strikes Back. Okay. I mean, the obvious thing is that the whales can't take it anymore, and they're going to just turn and attack the village. They're sick to death of being harpooned, and they've had enough. They've had enough, and they're going to fight back. Whilst I think that would make for a fun game, perhaps not this one. So I don't think that's it. Now, the first time I played this, we had Tio trying to retrieve a MacGuffin. It was a knife or something, wasn't it? Like a sacred relic. But what did we say about beasts in our truths? I think we said monsters were very real. Let's look it up and see what we actually said. It says beasts of all sorts roam the Ironlands. They dwell primarily in the Reaches, but range into the settled lands to hunt. There they often prey on cattle, but attacks on travellers, caravans, or even settlements are not uncommon. Okay, so what if there is some sort of beast, or beasts, plural, that terrorizes this entire region, like the Ragged Coast and the Barrier Isles. And what if Mournstone holds some kind of thing that can ward them off? What if there's this legendary monster? And the thing that's kind of hopping straight to my mind, mainly because of this piece of art from the Ironsworn rulebook, and this is one of the things that I first saw when I was flicking through it all those years ago, that I was like, oh yeah, I'm into this game. I think this is a Leviathan, right? This is a Leviathan from the deep. What if one of these, right? What if one of these kind of like seasonally or periodically returns to these waters, like it's its hunting grounds, and maybe it's like every few years or something. And when it comes back, it causes absolute carnage. Like, it gets very territorial. It drives off the whales or just eats them all. It smashes things up. It demolishes boats, just kind of causes an absolute scene. And this thing is it's massive, right? It's a big creature. And when it comes this far, kind of like into the kind of shallower seas, as it were, like it has this huge range. It hunts all the way up and down the Ragged Coast and between the Barrier Isles. So if you're on the water and you live anywhere in these regions, you are in big trouble. Like, you're toast. If you live near the water, you are going to have your shit wrecked. Like, and that's bad because anyone who lives in this region relies on the water for their way of life. And this is the Ironlands. People can't just pick up and move to the suburbs or like go on holiday and wait for it to blow over. So this is bad news. And everyone in the area knows that it's coming back this year, very, very soon. Maybe like there have been some kind of omens, some portents that people have read into it, and like it is coming. And like maybe this is, yeah, in fact, yeah, I'm going to say it. It's a few days away. This thing is coming back in a few days. But there's one thing. There is one thing that can ward this thing off. It's like this creature's kryptonite. It's this ancient, mystical, firstborn artifact. And whatever it is, whatever this kind of MacGuffin is, it can actually keep this thing at bay. So, like, maybe when this beast does return every few years, or every year, is that too often? I'm just going to say every few years. When it returns, like, there's almost kind of like this ritualistic thing that happens, and this kind of hardy, brave, maybe like specially selected crew man this special boat, and they row out into the shallows and they face this monster down. And I don't know, they like show the artifact of this thing, or like they put it in the water and it, I don't know, like resonates with some weird frequency that kind of drives it away. I don't know, but there's something that it does that means it's the only way they can deal with it. They can't fight it. It's fucking ginormous, right? They will just get like absolutely ruined if they try. So they just have to make sure it doesn't attack. And the only way they can do that is with this artifact. So holding this artifact is an incredibly powerful thing. And guess what? That's what the bandits have taken. That is why the village is in such a state. There was a raid like a few days ago and they took it. And that is why the place seems so empty. That's why a lot of villagers are packed up and they've not gone on holiday to wait for it to blow over. They have just straight up fled. That's how desperate they are, because without the artifact, they cannot defend themselves. But Asher is stubborn, and she is staying. She will defend Mournstone to her dying breath. And now she has Tio. And I think that when she originally called for aid, I think she was definitely after like muscle, right? Because she wanted to deal with the bandits. That's who she was trying to run off. But now, kind of knowing Tio as she does and what his skill set is, she might just be thinking that he could be the right man to retrieve what was taken from them. She turns to him and says, "Where's Mila?" And Tio says, "It's just me now." And Asher says, "She finally gets sick of your shit." Tio says, "She's dead." And the wind whips up, and Tio shudders, and Asher doesn't even flinch. She's wearing this kind of sleeveless tunic, like with a studded leather breastplate. She doesn't even have a cloak to warm herself. Like, she's hardcore. She has pale skin, stocky physique. She has dark hair, which has streaks of grey running through these long braids that she has. And like the rest of the village, she looks pretty banged up. Her arms are kind of covered in cuts and bruises, and she has this kind of like purplish blue bruise around one bloodshot eye. And like her guards are in a similar state. Like, one has an arm in a sling, the other heavily bandaged head. And she says to Tio, "Well, it looks like I called for a hammer and a chisel arrived." Which is actually no bad thing given the circumstances. Asked me 2 days ago and I'd have given my right arm for a couple of good swords, but now it looks like what I need is a thief. And a good one. Tio says, "I'm listening." And Asher lays everything out. Tells Tio everything about the monster, the artifact, the bandits, everything. They raided a few days ago and took the artifact. And the two of them, along with some of the other guards, are now down in another building. They are in the Hall of the Overseer. In Ironsworn, and more specifically our version of the Ironlands, what we established during the truth-setting exercise was that communities are governed by people called Overseers. And Asher and Tio are stood in Mournstone's Hall of the Overseer, which is kind of like this kind of archetypal, like Viking long room. It's, you know, like a long room with banners and murals kind of garnering the walls, perhaps depicting better times when there were whales and people to stab them. But yeah, it's a kind of a rundown place now. This is very much has a kind of faded glory vibe to it, in keeping with the rest of the village. At the end of the hall is a dais, and upon that sits a throne of sorts. This throne is made from kind of like wood, but like specifically bits of wood from ships, like bits of gangplank and decking and bits of like figureheads and mast poles and stuff like that. And these have all come from, no doubt, important ships from Mournstone's past, and they tell their own story of this place. It's adorned with metal cleats and lengths of old rope and netting, and it's very unusual, this thing, but for the surroundings it's very fitting. And above the throne is a cradle. When I say cradle, I mean like a couple of hooks, kind of upturned hooks, where something long should hang. But for now, the cradle is empty. Let me just quickly roll up a name. 79 is Bryn. Okay, the overseer was called Bryn. Asher says, Bryn was no better or worse than most overseers. He was relatively popular, was fair and just, to a point. He couldn't fight, though. They made short work of him, and his guards. Tio says, and they took it from here. As easy as that. And Asher says, these aren't your average knuckle-dragging thugs. They're organised, well-armed, and I hesitate to say trained. They outnumbered us and moved quietly until they wanted to be seen. Bryn was dead before the alarm was even raised. And she looks up at the empty cradle, and I think now's the time to figure out what this MacGuffin is. Like, what is this artifact? Now, I think I'm leaning towards the obvious, which is like a weapon of some kind, but a weapon that is like a firstborn relic, like an ancient blade perhaps, but I don't want to do a sword. Swords are done. That's boring. So this needs to be something more fitting with our surrounds, which are kind of like nautical, I guess. And there is an obvious one that's kind of mentioned in the book, which is a harpoon. The rule book lists something called an abyssal harpoon as a weapon that might be used against the Leviathan of the Deep. So it could be that. Or actually, fuck it. No, this is even better. This has just come to me. It's a fucking trident, right? That's even better. A trident. But actually, no, it's a trident, but it's in parts, like the teeth of the trident, the prongs. Is that what they're called? I'm not going to look it up, but I think, yeah, prongs. I'm going with prongs. The prongs, that's what's made from the firstborn kind of relic material. That's this kind of strange, kind of like smoky emerald green glass type material. And the rest of the trident is just kind of normal metal or whatever. And the bandits have just taken the prongs. They have stripped the trident of the important bits. So I'll actually walk it back a little bit and say that the cradle isn't empty. It just has the handle, which is a good kind of like 2 meter long handle. And actually, whilst it's kind of made of like normal metal or whatever, it's pretty ornate actually on closer inspection and kind of quite unusual looking. But the prongs of the trident, the material they're made from, that's the valuable part. And I guess, like, for convenience, the bandits were in a hurry. They just took those, which makes sense. That means they can move quicker with them. It's not kind of like a big and bulky thing. They just took the prongs and out they went. So, shall we give this artifact a name? I think we'll roll up a firstborn name. There's an oracle for firstborn names, and specifically elf names. We'll roll up something off that. What we got? 69 is Anatu or Anatu. Anatu, I think, is probably better. So the Trident of Anatu sounds bad. I think that's maybe too literal. So how about the Teeth of Anatu? No, the Fangs of Anatu. There you go. The Fangs of Anatu. That sounds cool. Let's go with that. Fangs of Anatu. So now we know what we need to retrieve. Let's swear an iron vow to see it done. So looking at the move, it says when you swear upon iron to complete a quest, write your vow and give the quest a rank. Then roll plus heart if you make this vow to a person or community with whom you share a bond, add +1. So this vow is going to be called simply Retrieve the Fangs of Anatu. And how hard is this going to be? Well, this is a mini campaign, and as much as I'm having fun doing this, it would be very easy to spiral off into lots of different directions and drag this out. So I'm not going to make it too hard, and I'm leaning towards either dangerous or formidable. And I think I will err towards dangerous so we don't find ourselves wrapping up this campaign next July. So yeah, this is dangerous. Now, when you start an Ironsworn campaign, you can have up to 3 people or 3 communities with whom you share a bond. And I actually think it makes sense for us to share a bond with Asher. We have served alongside her in the past, and I think that, like, even among mercenaries, kind of sellswords and cutthroats, that must count for something. So let me just make a note of that we share a bond with her, and we will take +1. So let's swear on some iron, which is actually a good point. What do we swear on? I haven't really thought of Tio having anything that he wears like Archer does. Okay, let's just do the trident handle. In fact, whilst we're in the kind of vague misnaming parts of a weapon territory, is it a handle or is it a haft? I'm going to go with haft. That's what we're calling it. I'm not going to look it up. That's what it's going to be. And let's describe it quickly. I said that it was kind of made of normal metal, but actually it was quite ornate. Those two things are contradictory. Welcome to the bad spot. It's ornate, and it has this kind of inlaid iron. On closer inspection, you can see this inlaid iron running the length of the haft. So that's going to do us for the swearing on iron part of this. So Asher brings it down kind of gently from the cradle that is above the throne and offers it out to Tio, who grips his right hand around it and swears the vow. So let's roll our first dice of this campaign and say, let's swear an iron vow, rolling plus heart. Well, that seems an apt way to begin this campaign. Again, and there's nothing our momentum can do to help because it's only at 2 and it's about to get worse. So let's see what it says. On a miss, you face a significant obstacle before you can begin your quest. Envision what stands in your way and choose one. Our options are you press on, suffer -2 momentum, and do what you must to overcome the obstacle, or you give up and forsake your vow. Well, those are 2 stellar options. And I think, just as a side point, when people talk about the original Ironsworn being harder or more punishing than Starforged, it's like stuff like this. That's what they're referring to. This is what they mean. These options just don't exist in Starforged. A miss on a swear an iron vow is just a complication, and you crack on. There's no mechanical penalty and no option to quit. Whereas here, it's give up or total momentum wipe. And that option is brutal, but it's the one you pretty much have to go with the whole time because giving up is worse. And given that those are our choices, I think I'll take the lesser of the 2 evils and we'll press on. And we'll take my momentum, a resource that in this version of the game is so precious. We'll take that down to 0. Great start. So we face a significant obstacle before we begin our quest, and I think having just established the details about the fangs of Anatu, I think it's obvious what this is going to be. And I think it's that the bandits have realised that the thing won't work without the handle, right? It won't work without the haft, whatever we're calling it. And they've got to come back and take what they left, what they kind of mistakenly thought was worthless. So I think Asher tells Tio this, that in their haste, the bandits missed this valuable piece and just kind of left it hanging on the wall, thinking it was a meaningless adornment. But it's quite the opposite. They need it for it to work, and the bandits are going to be coming back. So I'm going to skip time forward a bit here and wind things on. And we're going to rejoin Tio, who has retired to the bunkhouse for the evening. He's been instructed to get a good night's rest before he heads out in search of the stolen relic. And he passes the time trying to kind of quiet Mila's presence by pacing up and down and throwing knives at this little kind of chalk circle that he's kind of drawn on the wall, this little target. The bunkhouse is basic and his room is small. And he just can't wait to be out of here. This place, Mournstone, feels like a terrible place to die, and he can't really see why Asher is holding on so tightly, because with the Overseer dead, she could just do what most wardens do and move on to the next village or the next one after that. He is sure that there are no shortage of folks who live in this region who need protecting, and she is good at what she does, but for some reason her obstinance is keeping her here. And Tio has been kind of turning this over and over in his head for hours now, and the night has drawn in quickly and shrouded the village in this inky blackness. And he's been trying to shake the bad feeling that he's had since he arrived, that something is amiss here, or that something dreadful is just around the corner. And then Tio hears the ring of the alarm echoing across Mournstone, and almost instinctively he knows what's happening. It was only a matter of time before they figured out they needed the haft and returned, and there is only so long that Asher is going to be able to keep it safe. This is the dreadful thing that he has felt coming all this time. And he is, like any good soldier, already pulling on his gear as he moves to the door, and he holds it open a crack. And you can see torchlights streaming up the dock and towards the village between the houses. And he can't tell from here if these are villagers who are fleeing or if it's the bandits who have made landfall. But as he sees the first thatch roof set ablaze, he realizes it ain't the villagers. He looks out towards the dock and sees another boat must have just landed, and he tries to kind of quickly count, maybe 24, probably more. And Asher was right. They're organised. These are not your standard cutthroats. So what are we doing here? I think we need to get to the tower. We need to get to Asher. That is most likely where she's going to be, and she is going to need help. Tio can't fight his way through, so he's going to have to use the environment and the conditions to get across the village. It's, I don't know, about 300 meters, I'd say, as the crow flies from the bunkhouse to the tower, but there is general chaos between him and Asher, and I think what we're going to do is he's going to use this vantage point, because the bunkhouse is kind of up, kind of like slightly raised up on a bit of a hill. He's going to use this vantage point here to try and figure out the best way, the most efficient way to get to her. And that's going to be a move. And that move is Secure an Advantage, which says when you assess a situation, make preparations or attempt to gain leverage, envision your action and roll. And we're going to be using insight or observation here, so rolling plus wits. So let's secure an advantage, rolling plus wits. Yeah, it's a weak hit. On a weak hit, your advantage is short-lived. Take +1 momentum. So there we go. Climbing back up the momentum track to a mighty 1. And I think he pretty quickly can work out the most efficient way to get there. And it's down an alleyway, then through kind of like a long row of abandoned cottages, like go into each cottage and then out the other side into the next one, etc., etc. Because that row of cottages pretty much runs from the other side of the alleyway to the back side of the tower. And the bandits for now appear to be converging down at the docks. And Tio knows where they are. They're at the hall of the overseers, which kind of makes sense, as that's where they found the trident in the first place. But he knows that it won't be long until they realise it's been moved, and there really aren't too many other places that it's safe to kind of guard something valuable other than the tower. So that's where they'll be going. So Tio doesn't really have long, and he has to move very quickly to try and get there, and desperately, importantly, not to be seen. There's fires kind of being set now around the docks, and these bandits are starting to light up Mournstone, and the cover of darkness is not going to last very long. And for someone who wants to remain hidden, that's a bad thing. So we need to move. And I think we're going to do so by making the move Face Danger. Face Danger says when you attempt something risky or react to an imminent threat, envision your action and roll. And I think because we're trying not to be seen as the kind of the first thing, this is going to be with deception, stealth, or trickery, so rolling plus shadow. And we're also going to be bringing one of Tio's assets into play here. It's the Infiltrator asset, which says, when you make a move to breach, traverse, or hide within an area held by an enemy force, add +1 and take +1 momentum on a hit. So the streets of Mournstone are very much being held by the bandits right now. It's not a safe place to be, so Tio is going to have to rely on his stealth skills. So let's face danger, rolling plus shadow. And with the extra +1, that is a strong hit. You are successful. Take +1 momentum, which takes up to 2. And the bonus bit of momentum from the asset gives us a mighty 3. So, yes, we are back above where we started. That's not to say I have enjoyed going down to 0 immediately. So, this is Tio's thing, right? This is his comfort zone. Like, he can use his surroundings to blend in. He can move unseen. He can use the tiniest momentary distraction to his advantage. And right now, he is moving swiftly through between the cottages that stretch from the bunkhouse to the watchtower. And he pauses briefly and ducks in the shadows whenever he hears footsteps outside, because he doesn't want to risk finding out if that's villagers or whether that's bandits or not. He just wants to stay unseen. And he makes it, which is good, because through the slats and the broken windows of the cottages that he passed through, he can see more roofs being set ablaze, sending these towering, swirling columns of embers into the night sky. As he reaches what he is certain is the last of the cottages in the row, he kind of gently eases the door open to see what the situation is at the tower. And the first thing he sees in the alleyway that this leads out onto is members of Asher's militia kind of hustling around, getting into position, bows ready, bundles of arrows in hand, and taking cover behind carts and crates and upturned tables and basically anything. And it appears that Asher has set up a fairly decent, solid ambush. And knowing her, the bandits are probably about now realizing that the haft that is hanging in the hall of the overseer right now is a dummy. It's like a broomstick or something. And when they realize that, they are going to head towards the tower. And what little kind of resistance Asher has managed to drum up with this ragtag militia and her kind of deputies, it's actually meaning they're going to catch these bandits in a pretty deadly crossfire. Asher, to be fair, does not have a lot to work with, but she has definitely made the best of it. And no matter how organised this group of bandits are, or how well trained that Asher thinks they might be, she knows that they don't have infinite resources, they don't have infinite numbers, they can't keep sending raiding parties night after night after night. They will run out of bodies, and for now she is trying to lean into that and weather this storm and let the waves of this assault break against their defences. And as she's looking down into the alleyway at this trap that she's set, Tio gets her attention. They lock eyes briefly, and she nods to him and then briefly disappears from view. And as kind of Tio is waiting to see what's happening, he kind of starts to think about what he's going to do if the bandits get this far. And the position that he's holding right now is probably the best he's got, because should the bandits make it past the kind of line of archers and kind of skirmishers who are kind of in the alleyway, he could probably get off some throwing knives at close range before slinking back into the cottages and making some kind of escape. So he's kind of thinking it over. But whilst he's considering this, Asher appears, holding something wrapped in rags. And she says, "Take it. It's not safe here." And Tio knows exactly what he's being given. But he looks anyway. He pulls the rags back with his hands and sees the ornate haft of a trident. It's been dismantled into several pieces, and Tio notices the haft is kind of really, really strange. It's kind of almost mechanical in its construction. And Asher says, "Make for Brigand's Rest. It's an old smuggler's outpost. That's where the fangs will be. I'm sure of it." And she forces the bundle into his hands, and he slings it over his shoulder and stows it on his back. Asher says, "You have 3 days. Get to the dock, take a dinghy." And behind her, Tia can see the militia knocking their arrows. The bandits are getting closer. Another rooftop goes up in flames. Asher says, 3 days. Go. And she turns it back to the tower and disappears inside. So Tio has to go, right? He has to get to the dock because he's not going to join the fight. He has to get the haft out of here. I think that's because Asher has realised that protecting it is the most important thing, right? And getting out of Mournstone might just be the best way of doing that. But here's the problem. Tio needs to get to the dock, which isn't far. But there's just a band of torch-wielding bandits between him and his dinghy, his means of escape. And he has to kind of move now. So I don't think that staying in the shadows is an option anymore. We're going to have to hustle. We're going to have to move quickly. And looking at his options and how this kind of town is laid out, he's really left with one choice, which is he's going to have to go up onto the rooftops and try and kind of quickly hop from building to building and then kind of drop down behind where the bandits are and just hope they don't see him. It's risky, but it really is his only option unless he wants to stand and fight, which isn't his style and not what he is good at, to put it politely. So Tio crosses the cobbled street. You can see the torches up ahead now through the smoke, and some flaming arrows have started to rain in from the docks. And he quickly clambers up onto a rooftop, kind of staying low, crouching to stay out of sight. He looks in the direction of the dock and he figures he can make it if he's fast, and he can make it if he's lucky. It's 3 rooftops and then a short leap across a narrow alleyway, and he's there. He is at the dock. He'll just need to find a dinghy and he is free. So let's get going. Let's move. And we're going to face danger again. And this time we are going to be moving at speed rather than trying to stay hidden. We still will get a +1 from our infiltrator asset as we are moving through enemy held territory. So let's face danger rolling plus edge. Okay, that's a miss. That's a miss, and yeah, nothing we can do about it. On a miss, you fail or your progress is undermined by a dramatic and costly turn of events. Pay the price. And paying the price is making the most obvious negative outcome happen. And that is that we get discovered. And to dial it up in terms of negativity, we are going to have to fight our way out. I want to avoid fighting at all costs in original Ironsworn. It's too hard. I don't have the best of records, but it kind of looks like a fight has found us, and there's not really a great deal we can do about it. So Tio is running across these rooftops, kind of being careful not to slip on any kind of tiles or kind of loose scree or kind of put his foot through the thatching. And he can now see the bandits down below moving from building to building, torching them as they go. And he counts maybe 20. There's 20 bandits, he thinks. Not quite the overwhelming force that Asher said came the first time. And maybe this time around they've underestimated the resistance they've run into. Who can tell? Tio certainly doesn't want to hang around to find out. So he just keeps moving nimbly across the first 3 rooftops until he reaches the alleyway. He ducks down as kind of 2 bandits run past below him, and he waits for a second to see if the coast is clear, and he's actually relieved that he doesn't have to jump across because there's a beam that has kind of fallen and it bridges this gap, and kind of looks at how narrow the alleyway is and reasons that even if the beam is unstable, he'll be over it so quickly that he'll be fine. And he makes the split-second decision to just go and begins to run across the beam. And that first step is sturdy enough. But it's the second that's the problem. And Tio knows instantly that he's made a bad choice as he feels his foot crunch through burnt wood and falls into the alley below. And lucky for Tio, this is a short fall into a dirt path and not onto bone-breaking cobblestones. And he has kind of like the presence of mind to kind of roll into the fall, I guess, like kind of tumbling over several times before he kind of slams his back into the wall of the building opposite. The building he was aiming for the roof of. He quickly checks himself over and he is unharmed somehow. He's done all right there. But he now has a bigger problem because he can see a bandit in the alleyway. And it's the first clear look he's had at one of these bandits, and he is kind of instantly taken aback by their unusual appearance because this is not something he's seen before. This bandit is a hulking brute wearing a heavy leather tunic. His muscled arms are exposed. His pale skin is covered in decorative scarring, running in concentric circles round his wrists and his biceps. And he wears a mask, a strange, featureless wooden mask with sunken eye holes giving it this kind of skeletal appearance. He also wears a very unusual red scarf that appears to be made of some sort of scaly leather. And Tio is taking in this strange sight almost as if there is no danger, but there really is, because the bandit is looking right at him and he has this heavy blade, this sort of half sword, half cleaver to the ready, and he charges towards Tio. So as much as I would rather not, it looks like we're going to have to enter the fray, which says when you enter into combat, set the rank of each of your foes. So our foe is a brute, that's what we're going to call him. And Asher said these were no ordinary bandits, so I think these are going to be dangerous foes, which, looking through the book, that is about the same rank as a raider or a warrior that's listed kind of in the NPC section. So that's a dangerous foe. Which means that you inflict 2 progress per harm, and they inflict 2 harm on you. And I'm going to have to try really hard to concentrate during this fight, because combat in Ironsworn is very different from Starforged, and my grip of rules anyway could charitably be described as loose. So I need to really, really, really think and remember it's mainly the difference between harm and progress and how they relate to each other. So we're going to just have to see how this goes. Then the move says, then roll to determine who's in control, and then gives us some options. And I think out of all these, like, ambushed for us is the most kind of appropriate, because like we've literally just fallen from the sky into the path of this dude. So it's going to be rolling plus wits. So let's enter the fray. Rolling plus wits. Okay, a weak hit. I'll take it. On a weak hit, we can choose one. So we can bolster our position, so take +2 momentum, or prepare to act and take initiative. And as tempting as taking the initiative sounds, I'm actually going to take the momentum here, which puts us up to 5. And I think this bolstering of our position and this kind of readiness, I think, is represented by Tio getting quickly to his feet and getting his head together and kind of being alert, and kind of he's definitely not in control of the situation. He's definitely not ready to fight, but he is switched on. And the brute kind of lumbers in, ready to bring his cleaver kind of swinging down. But as he does, Tio reaches for a bit of debris from the beam that's just fallen, this kind of smouldering bit of wood, and he flings it in the bandit's direction. It's not an attack. It's not meant to do damage. This is just meant to buy him a second, to kind of distract the bandit whilst Tio moves. And he is going to move into the nearest burning building. Yes, into a burning building. This is very much a risky move, so it's going to be very much a face danger sort of situation, because going into a burning building, essentially to hide, is pretty dangerous. So if he's hiding, this is going to be stealth and deception. So Let's face danger, rolling, plus shadow. Ah, there we go, a strong hit. On a strong hit, you are successful. Take +1 momentum, so we are up to 6, the giddy heights of 6 momentum. And also because of the strong hit, importantly, we get to take the initiative, which is very, 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 very crucial in combat. Any strong hit on any move in combat gives you the initiative. And we're going to need it because we are going to set a trap. So, let's envision this. Tio flings that flaming hunk of wood towards the bandit, and the bandit doesn't like duck, doesn't flinch, anything, just kind of cleaves it in two with their blade. But as they do so, it sends ashes and embers everywhere, causing them to kind of momentarily stop as their vision is kind of clouded, kind of literally clouded by this kind of dust and ash. But that's all Tio needed. And he swiftly moves across the alleyway and pushes through the door of the flaming house opposite. And there are flames, but the fire is not yet out of control or raging inside. But it is filling up with smoke, which is kind of perfect for Tio's needs. It's a simple cottage, it's small, and there's not too many places to hide. Whoever lived in here has taken all of their valuables with them. So Tio has little choice but to pull himself up onto the lintel. Is it a lintel above a door? I'm just going to say there's a beam above the door. He pulls himself up onto the beam above the door, and he can feel the heat from the burning thatching above his head. But this is the only good spot here that he can find to set this trap. He pulls out his knives, and he's ready to pounce. So this is going to be a move, and this is going to be secure and advantage. And I think once again, we can leverage our infiltrator asset here because we are hiding in an enemy controlled area. So let's secure an advantage rolling plus wits. Oh, and we needed that +1 from the asset because that would have been a weak hit otherwise. So lesson to new players, if you're listening, leverage your assets as much as you can. Cool. So we've got a strong hit. On a strong hit, it says you gain advantage. Choose one. Take control. Make another move now, not a progress move and add +1, or prepare to act, take +2 momentum. And we're going to take the +1 here, and we are going to make that other move immediately. And that move is going to be strike. Strike says when you have initiative and attack in close quarters, roll +iron. Now, we're not good at fighting up close, so that +1 from secure an advantage was really important. But in addition, we are going to use our cutthroat asset here, which says when you are in a position to strike at an unsuspecting foe, and then we get to choose one of these two options, but we have to do it before we roll. One is to either do 2 extra harm, or the other is to add +2 to the roll and take some bonus momentum. And I'm feeling kind of risky, and I think I'm going to choose to do the +2 harm, because I think by my incredible understanding of the rules, I think that's going to be strong enough to maybe one-shot this guy. But it does give us lower odds of success, and I'll always go for what's better in terms of what seems better, but not what actually is better. I'm not an optimal player of anything really, but I'm just going to go with it. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to pick the extra harm. So Tio waits, and the bandit doesn't take too long to barge down the door and enter the room below. And it's starting to really, really, really fill with smoke now, and parts of the roof are starting to collapse. But Tio waits. He waits for his moment. The moment that the bandit lets their guard down. The moment that the bandit thinks they have lost Tio. And it's a body language thing. And even through the smoke and flames, Tio can see it. It's a drop of the shoulders, slight relief of tension as it leaves the body. And there it is. There's the moment. The moment the brute takes his eye off the prize. Tio drops from the rafters, knives out. Okay, so let's strike. Rolling +iron. It's a weak hit. It's not quite the killer blow that I had hoped for. But it's better than nothing. It says, on a weak hit, inflict your harm and lose initiative. So we will inflict our harm. So we're armed, so we inflict 2 harm. And we mark 2 progress per harm, because that's the rank of the villain, right? So that's 4 progress from the weak hit. But we also inflict another 2 harm from using the Cutthroat asset. So that's another 2 progress per harm, taking the bandit up to 8 out of 10. So it was nearly enough to one-shot that guy. A strong hit would have been super desirable there. But not to be. We have lost initiative. That's the downside of this weak hit. And because we were trying to dispatch this guy in one. As Tio is not the greatest at going toe-to-toe. But here we are. So let's envision this. Tio gracefully drops onto the brute's back, kind of plunging his knives between his shoulder blades. But rather than slump to the ground, the bandit remains standing, remains upright. He is twice Tio's size, and despite this being a precision stealth kill attempt, he's still upright, he's still standing. And he tries to shake Tio off his back like he's just a nuisance, and Tio is gripping on by the handles of his knives, and the bandit stumbles backwards, crushing Tio into the wall, and more burning thatchwork starts to fall into the room. And the bandit does this again and again, and Tio can feel the wind being knocked out of him as his grip is loosening. I think one more of these and he's not going to be able to hold on any longer, and the brute will have him pinned against the wall completely at his mercy. So we need to do something. The smoke is getting thicker, the roof is starting to collapse, and I think Tio puts his kind of feet out behind him, and they find stone, they find the wall. And this time when the brute tries to force him into the wall again, he should be able to kind of push back with his legs and maybe try and reposition, kind of flip the bandit around perhaps. So this is going to be face danger again, and it's agility, I think. This is going to be kind of trying to throw the brute off balance and reposition rather than kind of use kind of power or force. So let's face danger, rolling plus edge. Okay, it's another weak hit. On a weak hit, you succeed, but face a troublesome cost and choose one. And we've got a bunch of options. None of them are great. But I'm going to choose, I think I'd choose harm, because I think enduring a bit of harm here makes sense. So let's envision what happens. So the brute tries one last time to force themselves back, and Tio is clinging on, but as the brute throws his weight backwards, Tio's legs dig in and push off the wall, and he gets a surprising amount of leverage, and it kind of allows him to swing around 180 degrees and turn the bandit the other way, and the momentum sends Tio flying across the room, kind of spinning and sprawling across the wooden floor, and his knives have come out of the bandit's back and come with him, and he looks up at the brute, who is sort of dazed, as if the act of taking the knives out of his back has just kind of reminded him that he's been stabbed. And Tio doesn't have too much time to think about this, because that's when a beam falls from above, showering him with hot, burning straw. So that will be our one harm. But we're going to try and shake it off, because this is actually an interesting point of comparison. In Ironsworn, this is just part of suffering damage. You have to make the endure harm move. In Starforged, it is optional. You can choose to resist the harm, but not here. Not in the Ironlands. You have to do it. So endure harm says when you face physical damage, suffer -1 health equal to your foe's rank or as appropriate to the situation. And it's worth noting that our foe didn't actually do this to us. Like, we kind of did it to ourselves and then got hit by a beam. If they would have done it, it would have been 2 harm. And this was a bit of roof falling on our heads, so that's very different. That's just going to be 1 harm. It's going to take our health down to 4. And then the move says, then roll plus health or iron, whichever is higher. And health is 4, so definitely higher than our iron of 1. So let's endure harm. Rolling plus health. Yeah, it's a strong hit. Yes, on a strong hit, choose one. Shake it off. You can suffer -1 momentum in exchange for a health, or you can embrace the pain and just take a momentum. And I will do that. I'll take the momentum, which puts us up to 7. But the important thing here, the important thing about this roll was that it puts us back in control. It gives us the initiative back. Any strong hit in combat does that, and that's important because you need the initiative and you need a strong hit to end the fight, and that is what we're going to try to do. And I think this is perhaps the most punishing aspect of combat in Ironsworn. You sort of need 2 strong hits in a row just to have the chance to finish an opponent off. You need to have the initiative, and then you need to score a strong hit on a move to finish it, and then make the progress move itself. And that's very different to Starforge. Starforge is kind of much more forgiving. You can even try and end the fight if you're in a bad spot and you don't have the initiative, as it were. This is like playing the game on like extreme mode, which, you know, has its own charms and its own challenges. But yeah, that's what we're doing. So we really want to bring this fight to a close. But to do so, we want to give ourselves every chance. So we're going to try and think of a way to bring this brute down. We can try and strike again, but that has pretty harsh downsides, or we can try something else. And I think we're going to try something else. So Tio frantically shakes the burning thatch off him. There's really not much roof left at all now. The central gable has blistered and buckled with the heat and has very nearly completely collapsed. The brute is staggering and swaying across the room, like losing blood and consciousness at a rapid rate. But they're still standing, and they can see Tio, and they awkwardly lurch towards him. They're gravely wounded by that first strike, but they are still dangerous. They are still more than capable of killing Tio. So we need to think fast. And he does. And he looks up at that weakened gable and realizes the only thing holding it up is another piece of collapsed beam. And I think that if we give it a kick, that might just come crashing down. So we are going to face danger again. And I actually think this time it's going to be using wits, because we're using the environment. We are thinking outside the box rather than just standing and fighting. So let's face danger, rolling plus wits. Well, that is a miss, but luckily it is quite a low one, and we have a momentum of 7, and that is just going to have to bail us out. That's what it's there for. And in Ironsworn, momentum burns a bit different in that you burn it to cancel the challenge dice of a lower or equal value, which, lucky for us, is both of these dice, and that resets our momentum down to 2 and gives us a strong hit. So that's good, because we need a strong hit to end the fight. And the move End the Fight says, when you make a move to take decisive action and score a strong hit, you may resolve the outcome of this fight. If you do, roll the challenge dice, and compared to your progress, momentum is ignored on this roll. So we're at 8 progress, and that's all from that first hit. And that's about as good as it's going to get. I don't want to carry on fighting this guy, so let's roll to end the fight. A strong hit. Okay, yes, on a strong hit, the foe is no longer in the fight. They are killed, out of action, flee, or surrender as appropriate to the situation and your intent. So, Tio kicks at the beam, but it doesn't budge. And he kicks again. And this time he feels a little give. But the brute is close now, bearing down on him, lifting the cleaver with one huge final effort, one last kick Tio needs. But the brute is moving in, getting closer now, lifting the cleaver with one huge final effort. And with one last kick, Tio feels the beam give, and he uses the effort of kicking the beam to roll out of the way as the gable finally collapses, and what is left of the roof caves in, crushing the brute under a heap of burning wood and masonry. Tio gets to his feet, exhausted by the effort of the fight. And here's a thought I just had. Should we steal this guy's outfit? Like, should we steal his mask and his scarf? They're quite distinct, and I'm kind of wondering whether we should, because that could very well come in handy later if we ever want to find ourselves blending in or being disguised amongst a bunch of bandits. So we're going to do that. I think Tio, he picks up the mask, which has rolled off this brute's head in the impact. And it takes a bit more effort to kind of pull the scarf from the pile of rubble, but he does, and stows it away in his pack. And after he's done that, he really has no more business in this burning building. He must move. He must keep going. He checks the coast is clear and then exits through a window on the other side of the room. And he is down, finally, at the docks. It is quiet. He can hear the sound of fighting, of kind of bitter clashing behind him back towards the watchtower. But for now, he is where he needs to be. He just needs to find a dinghy and he needs to get out of here. And I'm not going to roll to see if there's a dinghy nearby because I think there just is. Like, we don't need that drama. But one thing I do want to know, and I think I might ask the Oracle, is did the bandits leave anyone behind to guard their landing craft? Because if they didn't, you better believe I'm going to sink that shit, right? Like, that's going down. That's going to give me such a huge narrative advantage if I mess with their ship. So I think we'll ask the Oracle, because I'm not sure. And it's going to be 50-50 in terms of likelihood. Did the bandits leave someone guarding their boat? 98 is yes. Okay, right, they did. Should I try and sink it anyway? Like, narratively, as I said, that would give me a huge boost. It will slow this episode down, that's for sure. What's my choice, really? So I can just, let's just say I can take the dinghy and go, and I won't make any rolls for that. That's just straightforward. That's fine. Or we could hang around and try some shenanigans to kind of disrupt the bandits even further. But if that goes wrong, it could make things a lot worse. I don't want another fight, and I don't think Tio does either. So I think we're just going to go with the easy option. So he could also see the dinghy, small and innocuous, moored at the other side of the dock, and he can easily skulk round the quay and get in and row away. And given the stakes of what he's carrying on his back, he decides to take the easy option. And he immediately sees the guard, right? Another heavy-set brute standing watch over the landing craft. And this landing craft is odd. It is a long, fast warboat built to carry a couple of dozen warriors usually. What this craft is doing in the possession of bandits is a mystery to Tio, and he kind of maybe thinks twice about doing anything to disrupt their plans, because he can also see the dinghy, small and innocuous, moored at the other side of the dock, and he can pretty easily skulk around the quays and get in and row away. And given the stakes, and given what he is carrying on his back, he decides to take the easy option. He works quickly and quietly untying the dinghy and easing the oars into the water without a sound. And he rows. He rows into the dark. It's a clear night, but the moon is only a sliver of a crescent, not offering much by way of light at all. For now, Tio must forge ahead, put as much distance between himself and the bandits as he can, and hope that Asher's resolve holds. After rowing increasingly quickly for maybe 10 minutes, he stops to look back from where he just came. The ragged coast is dark and silent, but in a cove set back from the water, it glows a bright and furious orange. Tio feels the weight of the haft on his back and begins to steadily row once again. And that's when he feels her near. Mila's spirit says, "Row as fast as you like. You won't escape the dead you leave behind." And he tries to ignore her and rows into a terrifying and dangerous unknown, as behind him, Mornstone burns.